Hey guys, Cage Cloud here with my Honeymoon review for Bill Nye Saves the World Season 1, which is now available on Netflix. There's been a lot of discussion about this series, in terms mainly of its kind of mocking tone, which was actually going to become a focal point, but considering how much it's become a focal point online, I imagine you've already heard of it. But just to briefly go over it, there's a lot of times, even in the first two episodes, not so much the first episode, but more the second episode, where it comes off more like Penn and Teller's BS or The Daily Show. By that I mean it comes across more mocking. There's a segment in the second episode where they go to talk to this guy who tries to heal people by sound, and the whole segment comes across as like a Daily Show or Penn and Teller BS segment. It comes across as this mocking tone towards these people, which is funny. In some sense, although not as funny as either one of those series would be, which is kind of another problem if this show was going to go in the comedy route. But it's not very scientific. Beyond that little brief intro to the mocking tone, I kind of want to stray away from that because there are other problems in the show. For one, it seems like the audience is at gunpoint. There are times where the laughter definitely seems very forced from the audience. But the biggest problem by far is that the show does not have an identity. I have no idea what the show is. I watched 2 episodes and I don't... Is it a science show or is it a comedy show? You know, some might say, well, maybe it could be both. Maybe, but very clearly it's not being received that well publicly, so maybe it can't be both. Maybe it's not possible to do both. The first episode, which is more about climate change, comes across as a science variety show. There's a few jokes here and there, but for the most part, everything seems fairly scientific. I really like the live demos. I love the set. They have a really nice set that actually has, like, projection glass or whatever, so it's glass that's tinted in a way that you can cast a projection on it, which looks really cool. And they have this big open set kind of area, and it's... I like the set a lot. And I like the practical science demos that they do a lot. In general, the first episode was not terrible. Like I said, the audience feels forced at times. But overall, the show just comes across as a science show. Not as good as Bill Nye the Science Guy. It lacks the energy. But it involves more people. It involves these, you know, have these out and about segments. Like they have Carly Kloss go to Venice and talk to the guys in Venice, like some of the engineers in Venice, about this dam that they're building to try and protect the city of Venice from the oncoming rising sea level. And that segment I liked. I thought it was done rather well. Yeah, overall I like that segment. There are times in the first episode where Bill Nye himself feels a bit forced as well. And there's still a bit of an identity at the beginning where I was kind of confused. What is this show about? You know, and they have an intro, but it doesn't really explain much about the show, to be honest. It explains kind of their goal, but it doesn't really emphatically state what the show is. And also, they have a debate segment, which I felt like could deal with an intro. In the first episode, the debate segment that they have, like a panel, right? They don't have anyone on the opposing side of climate change, which makes sense because, you know, there's a very, very small percentage of scientists who oppose the current ideas about climate change. But, yeah, an intro to that would have been nice so I kind of knew what it was. But the second episode, by far, is where the show falters. The second episode is where it kind of loses its identity and it becomes more a comedy show. They even have a stand-up comic in the second episode. Why? I don't know. I was confused. I was like, why do we have a stand-up comic here? What's the point of having it? Like, this is supposed to be a science show. And in general, the second episode, which is about alternative medicine, even on the panel, they have one guy who's receptive to alternative medicine. He's not necessarily 100% pro-alternative medicine, at least not in the way it's presented in the show, but he's receptive to the idea. And Bill Nye and another friend of his, I can't remember her name, but they basically just mock him for that. It just comes across as mean. It comes across as bullying, to be honest. It's like taped bullying. And I know that, like, for people who have been preaching science for a long time, get people who oppose you without really any thought for the scientific method can upset you. But this guy was not like anti-scientific method. He was very much kind of proposing, like, well, you know, so yeah, the guy, like, one of the things he says was like, oh, the guy in the sound therapy thing, right? He's crazy. Like, obviously, like, you can't just scream at people and fix their problems. But maybe there's some legitimacy to the idea of using sound, because we do use ultrasound. Now, ultrasound is obviously different than sound, and that's immediately the first thing they latched onto, was how different ultrasound was. But there might be some legitimacy to the sound theory that he's proposing, or at the very least, they should be open to it as scientists, but they're completely not. And yet, I don't really think bullying belongs in the science world. I think mostly it should just be like presenting facts and then being like, yeah, well, you think this, but here's the wealth of evidence that says you're wrong. Not like a bullying kind of thing where it's like, let's gang up on him and make him feel like he's like little and not important. And I feel like alternative medicine is kind of like cryptozoology. People like to mock cryptozoology, and people like to mock alternative medicine. However, there have been times where alternative medicine things and cryptozoology has actually proven to be correct. And I feel like to mock it for that is, a bit disingenuous. It's kind of like saying that, anything that comes out of this can never be right. When in fact there have been cases where before it has been proven right. So it should be subject to the scientific method and not just cast aside as if it doesn't really matter. Really, one of the things that I found a bit jarring in the show was the jump between the scientific and the comedy bits. There really seemed to be no rhyme or reason, and it just kind of came out of nowhere, and it was a bit shocking. It was a bit like, oh, okay, we're going back to a comedy segment now. And I'm like, oh no, now we're a serious science show. Overall, I'd have to say that this series is just, as far as its introduction, is not very good. I still don't know what it is. I don't know to tell you if it's a comedy variety show or a science variety show, or I guess it's a combination between the two, but sometimes it relies too heavily on one and too heavily on the other. And in general, it doesn't flow between the segments. It just kind of like jumps here and there. Especially when you get into the second episode. It doesn't really have me hooked at all. I love Bill Nye, by the way. Like, I grew up with Bill Nye the Science Guy. I love the Bill Nye the Science Guy episodes. I can still go back and watch them. In fact, there are some on Netflix you can go back and watch, which I recommend you do over watching this show, because they're just better. There's a higher energy to them. They're more entertaining. Even though they're meant for kids, they're still more educational in this show. This show just comes across as bullying and pandering to an echo chamber. And I really didn't want to see that from a science show. Yeah, if you want to get your science fix, I recommend you watch Bill Nye the Science Guy. I recommend you watch The Universe. I recommend you watch Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson over this show. They're all far better at it. There's also Crash Course, which is far better at it. Just the show is just not... It doesn't really have a place or a purpose. And so it's just not... It's not interesting. That's it. It really isn't. So yeah, that's it for Bill Nye Saves the World, guys. Peace. Hey guys, Cage Cloud here with a little bit of a special clip at the end of this episode. I didn't really expect to do like anything today. I didn't expect to do like a vlog or anything like that. But when I was out at the gas station, I noticed that they have new M&Ms. M&M Caramel. Let me just see if I can get these things out. Ta-da! Have these gas stations. So, I had to try them. So I'm going to now. They make it look like it's going to be a softer caramel. Well, it's not. It's kind of chewy, but... I don't know if I like that. I'm gonna try to bite it in half so you guys can kind of see the inside. See if I can focus that on it. Come on. It won't pick up focus, so I just need to back up enough. That should give you a good idea. Huh? It looks like, I don't like it that much.